What separates a great hitter from just a good one? Today, we're diving into what it takes to excel in baseball. Eddie Marrero, founder of ProBound USA Baseball and Marrero Sports Group, has worked with athletes from middle school to the pros, and he's here to share his insights. We're going to talk about hitting, but we're also just going to simply talk about what it takes to be an elite baseball player. Whether you're dreaming of college ball, pro ball, or just looking to refine your skills, you'll definitely want to listen in on this one. So, welcome back to the Student Athlete Performance Podcast. I'm your host, Nick Lemke, and today I'm excited to have Eddie join us. My goal with the podcast is really to bring you guys people who will help maximize your performance as an athlete. And I already know that Eddie's going to be one of those guys to do that for you. So, Eddie, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So let's kick it off with just talking about hitting specifically. I know you work with pitchers, but let's definitely dig into the hitting piece first. And so what are the most common mistakes you see high school players making at the plate?
Definitely approach, but the approach really, regardless of what kind of approach you have, if you don't have the right mechanics, that's where I think you get into trouble. What I see a lot of, and I got to go back a little bit with Little League and things of that nature. If you see the talent on a player, you want to get them with a good hitting coach so that proper mechanics are being taught at a younger age. Not necessarily that they could do it, because a lot of kids, cannot control their bodies at the time, but at least they know how to. And they know exactly what it looks like. So some of the biggest issues that I see with high school players is casting, which means you're casting your bat out, just like if you're throwing a fishing rod, and disconnect. Okay, not using your lower half. Those are the little things that I see that players make big mistakes. Not keeping your head in the swing, kind of looking out before you even take the swing. Timing is also a big issue. Starting your swing before that front foot hits the ground, not staying back. And then you hear that word used loosely. Stay back, stay back, stay back. It's not really staying back. It's really getting into your hips, into that back hip. These are the little things that I see, and the blame falls more on coaches, because coaches don't explain and don't start the basic. I see a lot of coaches just get with players and start just soft tossing instead of taking the time to teach the mechanics properly from the beginning. And it takes patience, especially with the little guys. You gotta be patient with them. But by the time they get to high school, they should have a better idea of what a swing is supposed to look like, even if they cannot do it.
Okay. So you talked about the lower half piece, and I know that's a big piece with pitching as well, where pitchers tend to use their upper body way too much and underutilize their lower body. How does that play into like the hitting?
Actually, to be totally honest with you, pitching and hitting are so similar, right? The it's a domino effect. The lower half goes. You just can't see it in major league players because it happens so quick, right? But the lower half goes, and then the upper body kind of stays back, and then it rotates towards the ball with a good, as long as you stay connected. So that's what I see a lot of kids do. Is a lot of kids, and especially at the high school level, their swing is starting, their hands are starting to move, and their front foot's not down. So what you get is you gotta get this instead of getting this. And to me, that's probably one of the biggest issues. Is not a lot of what I see also is coaches always start switching or making changes in players. A lot of the problem is timing. If you get your right timing and you get into a good position to hit, a good balanced athletic position, that's what it's all about. One of the things that I do with my players when I look at them, and especially the guys that are serious, I see how they move their body. Are they athletic enough? And if they're not, doesn't mean that you can't do it. It doesn't mean that you're not going to be a good player. But then you have to, as parents, if you're a player, talk to your parents, invest some of that money that you're investing in travel ball and doing all of those things. Go to an agility coach, learn how to move your body. It's a feel. You see it a lot with UFC fighters. You see it a lot with martial arts, right? They routinely practice something over and over and over until it becomes perfect, right? Same thing with baseball. Believe it or not, I grew up boxing. And so I take some of my boxing skills and I put it into baseball, in the sense that a boxer goes into the ring. Well, before he gets into the ring, but before he gets into the ring, you'll see him shadow box. What is he doing? He's visualizing. He's making sure that his punches are tight. He's visualizing what he's doing. He shadow boxing in the mirror. Then they go into shadow boxing in the ring, and they're just jogging around the ring, making believe they're fighting a fictitious person. They're moving, and it's pretty nice to see because you're looking at a guy. You're like, hey, that guy moves pretty good. Here's the thing: when he gets in there with a real boxer, okay, he tries to do the same thing. It's all movement. Baseball is the same thing. Visualize yourself hitting against a real pitcher, visualize your swing, and try to look in the mirror and try to keep it perfect so that way you kind of do it in a game as well. You start with soft toss, when you start with the T with soft toss, BP, it's a gradual process of you keeping that good swing until you eventually are able to do it in a live setting.
I like that. Yeah, I mean, number one, the progression. Number two, like you said, the visualization, I think is so huge, especially with like a lot of these athletes who, going to some of the games and they're so, like some of them are completely disengaged from the game altogether. And then there's the others who, they're so focused on their chants or certain things that they're doing in the dugout that they're not really like mentally preparing for what's to come. So what do you feel like are some things that they can like correct some of those approach pieces? So part of it, the visualization, is sounds like a big one. What are some other big pieces?
Well, as a player, as a high school player, I'll give you a scenario. When do you steal a base? Do you steal a base when you get on base and you're ready to steal a base? Well, guess what? You don't even know who the pitcher is, right? Especially in high school, you probably get to see this guy once or twice at the most, right? It's not like a major leaguer that plays 12, 13 games against a guy. They know whatever Nola's move is by this time, right? You're looking at a pitcher for the first time. So you're on base, you get picked off because you don't know what you're doing, right? When do you steal that base? You steal that base when you're in the dugout. Instead of talking to your buddies, instead of talking about girlfriends or what you're going to be doing after the game, you know, study what the pitcher's moves are. Now, when you are on base, now you have a better idea. Is it a neck pitcher, right? What I mean by that is when the pitcher's going to throw the first on a pickoff, does he turn his his shoulder first? Does he turn his neck first? A lot of coaches say, look at the feet, look at the feet. Well, guess what? The feet might be the last thing to move, right? He might turn that shoulder first, and that's routinely for him. So all of a sudden, you stay looking at the shoulder. Okay, the minute that shoulder moves, start heading back. Some pitchers will turn their head first. So the approach is sit there, watch the pitcher, okay, get his routine. Does he usually start you with a fastball? Does he, there's his third pitch usually a curveball? Um, Especially at the amateur level, these guys get into a routine. And so even coaches, I'll give you an example. Not sure if you've ever heard of the college Chipola, but Chipola is considered one of the top JUCO colleges in the nation. I believe, and I think I'm correct with this, but if I'm not, I'm pretty close to it. I believe Chipola has more major leaguers in Major League Baseball than any other college, including D1 colleges in the nation. I think the only college that has more major leaguers than Chipola is Vanderbilt, right? And just to give you an example, in 2017, out of 24-man roster, 14 got drafted. Okay, you literally go to this college to either get drafted or to go D1. You're put there by either a scout or an agent, and the coach is very particular on who he chooses. Going to a college like this, they usually compete for the national championship every year. My son wasn't even playing. My son was in the bench. He literally sat there and watched the other coach call pitches. He actually sat there and wrote every movement of his finger. And by the third inning, he knew every pitch that was coming. Okay. I believe it was the bottom of the seventh inning. Had the kid sit on a changeup, grand slam, right? I believe they gave him game ball that game because he wound up, helping win the championship because he knew every pitch that was coming and he will relay it to the first base coach, and that's the way it goes. What I mean by that, and the reason that I say that to you, is because if you are if your approach should be to be in the game, you got 2.5, 3 hours that you're playing this game. Be in the game every minute, and you'll see your game get better. Pretty much that's what I mean by that approach. You don't have the scouting. At the high school level, you don't have scouting reports like they do in D1 college or baseball. But you could create your own scouting report just by sitting there watching the pitcher. Hey, you know what? He has a good slider. When does he throw it? When you're sitting there, the only way you're going to hit a good slider is if you're waiting for a good slider. If you're sitting there and you're going to get surprised by the slider, there's a pretty good chance you're going to either roll over or you're going to swing and a miss.
That's a good point too, especially on that note, because I actually had one of my athletes. He's a D1 commit, and he was talking about like before nobody was watching him like his sophomore year, and now that he's committed and he's like they're gonna be watching me this year, like they got his eyes on him. So that was one of the things he had asked about when I interviewed somebody else on the podcast, and it was like, yeah, how do you handle the breaking ball when you're not expecting the fastballs anymore? It's like, well, expect the curveball or
Yeah,
expect the breaking ball.
yeah. Well, one of the things that Coach Jeff Johnson, who heads the Chipola College, used to get upset with the kids was, first pitch curveball swinging. He'll yank you out the game pretty much for that. You should be sitting fastball, because if you're sitting fastball, there's a pretty good chance you could react to the curveball. You could react to the changeup. You're sitting changeup, you're sitting curveball, especially in strike two, and this guy decides to throw you a 97-mile-per-hour fastball, you ain't going to react fast enough. So, that's the mental game of it. But of course, before you get there, you need to be a pretty good player in the first place.
Yeah. So, what about if we look at just like the pro athletes in general that you've worked with or been close to? What about their like habits, their routines? What are some of those types of things like before even stepping on the field or even before the game even starts? Like, what are some of those types of things that the high school athletes could really learn from?
I could tell you this from a pro player stance. These guys are very meticulous about their routine. They don't miss, and they do it over and over and over. It starts, believe it or not, with eating. Okay, what they eating the day before, and if you have a pro player that's really raking and doing everything that he's supposed to, he'll repeat that diet every day just because they're very superstitious about that. But their routines are pretty much the same. They each one of them has a different routine, but they stick to it like glue. I'll give you an example. I was watching a video on Harper. He does the backhand. He'll sit there and just take a short bat and just hit the ball up the middle. Jim Tomey, for example, his coach, uh, he was Emmanuel. He would go ahead and soft toss to him against the net, which is facing the stands, and he will hit with a heavy bat and a light bat. You want to get a routine that works for you, and you want to stick to that routine. First of all, stretching is important, right? You can't just go and show up in a game, not stretch, and expect to perform. It might happen once in a while, but for the most part, it's not going to happen. So you want to get into a good routine, a routine that reminds you of the little things that you need to do in a game. I always tell players the saying, practice like you play, right? And I say play like you practice, because if you practice like you play, you shouldn't have that problem when you get into the game, because you're already at the high level of intensity. One of the things that I see with a lot of players is they practice and they're joking and they're not taking it serious. And then they expect to, turn it on in a game. No, you need to turn it on during practice. Another thing is taking it to the next level is more like have that mentality. If you having an issue, for example, and you jerk a lot, let's say in practice, right? That's supposed to be kind of relaxing, no pressure, right? You're practicing, you're getting ready. If you're high strung in practice, how much more high strung you're going to be in the game, right? So even with your mental state, you need to stay the same in practice and in game. One of the things that I see a lot in hitters is jerking forward, right? Transferring that weight a little too early, trying to hit the ball too hard, and in soft toss when a coach is throwing to you, or another player, right? Work on your mechanics in practice and shoot for perfection, right? Because if you could be perfect in practice, I promise you, you're not going to be perfect in the game. Your adrenaline is going to be shooting, right? Things are going to get faster. You got mom and dad with the video camera. You got some dads yelling at you. So there's a lot of stuff going on, in the game that doesn't happen in practice. So try to mimic that practice to be more like the game. Take it serious. I always tell my players, shoot for perfection during practice, because you're definitely not going to be perfect in the game. This is not a perfect game, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So that just made me think about just like the routines and the pregame, the pregame routines of stretching. That made me think about a Pro Baseball Hall of Fame and my guy Ichiro. I'm from Seattle, so I gotta, and yeah, he had such a routine, like the stretching routine. You'd always see him do like pretty much consistently. Like there's specific stretches. When he's lining up for the plate, he did it like nobody else. But what do you feel like from Ichiro? Like, what would be one thing that any high school athlete could learn from Ichiro's approach or his just like him as in general as an athlete?
Well, Ichiro comes from the country of Japan, and they amaze me. They amaze me with the way they approach the game. And if you notice, most Japanese players approach the game all the same. They're very serious. They're very meticulous. Their stretching is immense. I could literally just sit there and watch Ichiro stretch and learn something from the guy, right? The same thing with Otani, Matsui when he played with the Yankees. These guys are meticulous. They just their approach to the game is more mental. Okay. So I grew up watching a guy named Bruce Lee. Okay. Guy was one of the greatest martial artists of his time. Very philosophical. The things he says, you can see it on Facebook all the time. He just says some pretty cool things, right? The game of baseball, they approach it in the same way as martial arts. It's routine, perfection, right? Doing the same thing over and over so that now it just happens automatically. One thing I saw about Ichiro that I loved, I actually got to see him take BP at Tropicana Park in Tampa, and he put on a show hitting the ball over the fence. The power on this guy was incredible. And then you see him in a game, he doesn't even try to hit a ball out. He just tries to place the ball in the right place. If this guy would have played his whole career in major leagues, I don't think Pete Rose will have the record of base hits. And I'm a fan. I'm a fan of Pete Rose as a player. But that's how good Ichiro was. One of the things about him, though, is his discipline. Very disciplined about the way he approaches the game. You see him at a bat, he is so focused on that pitcher. Okay, there's no. You see some other players, laugh and all that good stuff. Ichiro was just business right from the start. Probably one of the best players I've ever seen. I love his arm. I've seen him, make those throws from right field. Reminds me of my hero Roberto Clemente. But definitely a guy to watch and study. On his approach and his talent.
Yeah. Yeah. I had to ask because I was like, again, I grew up with him. Like I was like 5 years old, so that's right about the time he came to Seattle, and so that was my childhood. So, yeah,
He was a great player. And so, congratulations to him. Congratulations to CC and Walker. And all three of those, if you notice one thing about them, all business when they hit that field. I like to tell my high school players, you have a personality. You could be the nicest guy in the world, but when you get in between those two lines, you got to change that personality and that character to be in all business. Okay, you got to be competitive. Okay, and you got to want it, and you got to want it more than anybody else. If you're looking to play baseball in college, understand that you're competing with the best, and especially if you want to go D1, right? You're competing with the best players out there, and these guys are doing everything under the sun to get there. Making it to D1 is almost like getting drafted. You see the seriousness. I mean, these guys are working out. There's a young man right now in FSU named James Hankerson. Okay, I've been working with this kid since he was 12, 13 years old. Well, I started working with him. I no longer work with him because I'm a peer, of course. But, James, this kid at the age of 12, 13 was so serious about his game. Okay, it was just amazing to me to watch this young man just sit there with an FSU uniform and, you know, and get there. But what people see that, but what they don't see is all the work that he put in throughout the years to get the same thing with the catcher for FSU, Marcus Ginges. That kid he moved from upstate, from the northern states to Florida just to play baseball. I wound up signing him to Tallahassee Community College, and then I'm sitting here and he's a catcher, FSU. But these guys, they don't stop from morning to afternoon. They're either doing agility, they're doing strength and conditioning, they're practicing their skills, and they put it all into it. They don't have girlfriends, they're not out drinking, they're not out doing any of those things. They're serious about what they want, and they got what they wanted because they went ahead and put the time.
so true. There are so many things from the like, when I talk about like, oh yeah, like what are we gonna post from this? I'm like, there's so many things that we can like talk, like go into for sure. I do want to ask like if it's probably going to overlap with some of the things we've already talked about. But if you were speaking, like 15-year-old right in front of you right now, that wants to play college or pro ball, what would be like the one piece of advice that you would give them?
I would say think pro, but set your goals in college. First of all, that is your best way to get to pro is to be, to make it in college, right? Even if you don't get drafted out of high school, which is a very small amount, especially with 20 rounds left, Major League Base, Major League pro teams, they want to get the best of the best, and those guys that are playing at the college level are pretty much proven, right? There's always a few guys in high school that just stand out, just natural players. A-Rod was a natural player. I mean, that guy at the age of 15, 16, people looked at him and said, hey, this guy's going to definitely become a professional. If you saw him hit at the age of 16, 17 years old, which I got I got lucky to see, but this guy was already looking like a pro. He walked like a pro, talked like a pro, he jogged out to the field like a pro, and you just saw, pro all over him, right? But set your sights on college, okay? Let it happen. Because if you set your sights on pro and it doesn't happen out of high school, you're going to be frustrated, and it's things that, you're going to have to pick yourself back up, right? Just set yourself your sights on college and take it from there. But the one thing that I would do is do the small things. The small things is what gets you to the big things. Some people want to do the big things. Don't do the big things, just the little things, right? Learn the game. One thing that I see a lot of high school kids that don't do is watching baseball. Just a simple thing as watching the game will teach you so much. So I never had one lesson in my life on baseball. I got on the mound one time and I'm throwing, and somebody said to me, man, who taught you how to pitch? Because you could throw. I said, Tom Seaver. They looked at me and they said, Tom Seaver, you know Tom Seaver? I said, nah, I just watched him so many times, I'm going to imitate him, right? To this day, I'm 60 years old. I could hit like Steve Garvey. I could hit like, Clemente. I could hit like Mickey Mantle. I don't care. You tell me, I'll go and take the stance and I'm able to hit the ball because I learned so much from these guys just watching them. And then you have YouTube. Then you have slow motion, where you could see any of those things when I was growing up. Then you have swing analysis, right? This is all stuff now that we have because of the technology that we have. These kids have so much at hand. What I do see a lot of kids do today is they just watch the highlights of the game. Don't watch the highlights. The highlights don't teach you anything. Just hitting home runs, great plays. Watch a game. Watch how a player struggles. Watch how he gets out of the struggle. Watch how he makes his adjustments. One guy that I admire, and I mean, ever since he was a kid, I've seen him throughout his career, was Derek Jeter. And I'll never forget this. I believe it was ESPN. I might be wrong, but it was either MLB or ESPN. They made this video of him, his first at bat, and this is getting back to routines, right? His first at bat in Major League Baseball, he did the same thing that he did in his last at bat. And then they showed his first hit, they showed his 1,000th hit, his 2,000th hit, his 3,000th hit, to his very last hit. This guy didn't change anything. He was so particular about the way he hit that he even had the gentleman that announced him in the game, his voice recording so that he could hear the same voice, even though the guy had died 10 years before.
Damn.
Now hitting for the New York Yankees, number 2, Derek Jeter, right? It was amazing that he even wanted that to be the same,
Yeah.
and that's why Derek Jeter is Derek Jeter. Probably one of my, I would say probably in the top 2 baseball players of my lifetime that I love watching.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean I think again that meticulousness is so huge, and it's funny because even on the nutrition side of things, like we're regularly told when listening to some of those the dietitians that are working D1 pro level is like you have to be very careful how you even approach nutrition because of how meticulous they are. And
Right.
so, yes, some of their, and sometimes it's like, okay, some of their routines might actually be hurting them, like, Babe Ruth and his hot dogs, but like, you know, but like, but then again, yeah, it's very much that, finding that approach and making adjustments as appropriate. But again, it's that meticulousness and that routine, I think is huge.
Yeah. And you're a nutritionist, so yeah, nutrition is very important. Eating the right things. You know, having that energy. You'd be surprised if you go into a game and that energy level is not up. That could hurt your game. That could hurt. That could hurt your thinking. That could hurt. It happens to me at my regular job. I go to work sometimes. I don't have as much energy one day as I have the other. Sometimes I didn't drink enough water. I didn't eat enough carbs. I ate too much sugar. These are the little things that will help you. One of the things that I've always told my players, and especially my high level players, is look at the days that you did great. Go back. Not one day, not that day. Go back 2 or 3 days. Look at your routine of eating, right? Why did you feel so good? Why did you see the ball so well? Right? All of these things that play a part. And especially when you're playing in states like Florida, which is so humid, right? Arizona, which is real dry. Your diet has a lot to do with the way you react on that field.
No, and it's funny that you talk about, you're like, even like, yeah, when I have sugars or when I have things like that. I a lot of athletes I talk to, I literally just recorded a podcast this morning about everyone's obsessed over protein and just eating more. And it's like, okay, but like you got to get into like what you're putting in. And one of the guys I worked with too, he's already one of the top in the state as a 2028, and um he did a couple weeks with me like as a free trial or whatever, and he just started swapping out like the chips and the candy and things like that for more of the fruits and the veggies. And so it wasn't necessarily that he's eating more, he was just eating better, and even that improved his energy.
Yep, yep,
So
absolutely. I don't.
not a nutrition episode, so yeah, we don't need to go further. um but what to kind of wrap up, what's one common trap you see high school athletes falling into that really hurts their development long term?
One of the things that I see with a lot of high school players is frustration. Things are not coming out right. Things are not, they're not doing things, the right way, and all of a sudden they get frustrated. You can't give up in this game. This game is a game of failures. It's the most wonderful game. It's the one game that if you succeed 30% of the time, in the majors you're a multimillionaire, right? Baseball teaches you more about life than it does even the sport, right? I told a young man one time that came to me um, because he didn't get drafted out of college, um, and asked me, why? And I said to him, I said, well, what position do you play? And he told me third base. I said, well, there's the reason why you didn't get drafted. I said, you're 5'7", 175 pounds. I said, you know, being short doesn't make you not make it to the majors, right? Or become a pro. It's the position that you're playing. Why would you put a 5'6" guy, you know, in left field when you're competing against guys that are 6'3", 6'4"? Now, can a 5'6" guy take a job of for 6'3"? Yeah, he has to outplay him, he has to out hit him, he has to do everything, right? The height has nothing to do with it, and don't ever let anyone tell you that because you're short you can't play. Now, what you need to do though is find the right position for you. If you're a short guy, go to second base, right? Because at third base, you're going to be competing with guys that are 6'2", 6'3", 240 pounds to hit the ball a lot farther than you, right? Look at Altuve. That's a perfect example, right? If you're 5'10", 5'9", 5'11", you know what? You're not that fast. Doesn't mean that's not a place for you in baseball. Become a catcher, right? Or learn how to throw hard and be a pitcher, right? So don't get frustrated and don't give up. Don't let anybody take your dream away from you. What you want to do is you want to look in the mirror and say, I could do this, and work twice as hard as anybody else. If you're 5'6", then get some speed and become a center fielder. You don't need the greatest arm and you don't have to be tall. You just need to get a good jump at the ball and get there, right? Those big guys, believe it or not, that are 6'3", 6'4", a few of them could run, but most of the time they're there because of their hitting and their power and their arm. So try to find the right position for yourself. That's number one. Don't get frustrated. And you know what? Just you know, grind, grind. Don't let somebody tell you you can't do it. Prove them wrong. And pretty much that's my biggest advice to you. Don't give up.
Yeah, dude, I love this episode. Like, this seriously, like, I'm already like, all right, I'm gonna be sharing this to all my clients. I'm gonna be like, hey, even if you're not my client, hey, check this out. Like, there's just so many good insights from you of like, again, the mindset, the approach, the habits, the like, just so many things that guys and even girls in like softball, I feel like can, and really any sport can really learn from this. So I really appreciate you hopping on and chatting, Eddie.
You're welcome, man. It was a pleasure. And we could do it anytime you want. All right.
Yeah. Well, and I know you're more of an in-person coach, but if guys wanted to reach out to you, what would be the easiest way? Is that Facebook or?
No, I could give you my number if you want. I don't have a problem with that. You know, this is what I do for a living. I enjoy doing it. I take passion in it. One of my greatest feelings that I get is when I see one of my young men that I work with, you know, playing D1, you know, getting drafted. You know, being interviewed not too long ago, I worked with a young man, and I'll mention his name, named Adam Barger, and I met him down in Florida, and you know, I lost touch with him. I haven't worked with him in a while. You know, I haven't seen him, and I'm watching a Yankee Toronto game, and here comes this guy with long hair. I didn't even recognize him. And I see his name, Adam Barger. And I'm like, is that Adam Barger? And, you know, I got my phone. I called his dad. Hey, he goes, yeah, I'm at Yankee Stadium. You're watching this. It was amazing, right? What a great feeling to know somebody and know that, you know, even if it's just one word that you had or that you were able to input in his life that helped him get there. So you could reach me on Facebook. If it's okay with you, I could give my phone number, you know, 727-463-3460. You know, I got, you know, when I was in Florida, I had players from all over the United States come down and work with me. I've had Japanese players, I've had Venezuelans, Dominicans, Puerto Ricans, all 50 states. I've got a good friend of mine named Brian Domenico who runs the Power Showcase and used to run it out of Miami. As a matter of fact, that's where Harper got his fame from. He hit a 500-foot home run at the age of 16. You know, these are people that I've able to, you know, I've been able to work with. And one thing I will say is this: if you're working with somebody that's not doing it for you, that's not lifting you up and making you better, okay, shop for another coach because there's definitely good coaches out there that will teach you the right way of getting to where you want to be. And again, so you know, give me a call, and I'll be more than happy to talk to you. Text me, and you know, we'll go from there.
Eddie, your passion for the game is just, and for the people you're serving, I really really yeah, admire that. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure, man. Thank you.
Of course. Yeah, and then for the listeners, last thing of course is to keep striving for greatness.